I am Sam Otten, and with me is Jason Book, and in this video, we are going to run through some of the negative aspects of Justice League, or the parts that we didn't totally fall in love with. Overall, we both are fans of the movie, but we have some things that we can critique, and we want to talk through those right here. So, Jason, you ready to kind of dig into some of these?
Yeah, sounds good. Let's do it.
All right, so first of all, this is something that a lot of people are talking about as something that could have been better, and that is the villain Steppenwolf as the anchor villain of the film. I think he was serviceable, and I'll say a few more comments about how I think he did work in some ways, but I do recognize, as a lot of people are saying, that he left a little bit to be desired.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, to me, starting with the CG and the motion capture, the guy's voice was great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe the actor, I haven't seen a picture of him, has no way of filling that character physically, but I really thought it needed a character like a physical guy in a suit. And I remember, like, the Steppenwolf action figure I had is like a guy with a goatee and, like, looked like, just like a badass henchman of Darkseid. And to me, like, as far as the action scenes went and, like, him being in it, he was believable and all that kind of stuff, but it just didn't have the weight that he would have had, I think, if it was a real person. Because, especially compared to the Justice League having such screen time and showing these guys their personalities, it was hard to really delve into that with this guy, even though he had a lot of screen time, where he felt like just a fabricated CG character.
Yeah, it puts a little bit of a barrier between like the audience and the character, right? When you have the CGI in a way. And then I think too that it's also a little bit of this, how he was written, where he was often just vaguely talking to nobody in particular. Like
a lot of comic book rants,
comic book wise, that sort of thing happens a lot. But then in a movie, you're sort of like, who is he really talking to now? I think he worked better when he was like interrogating the scientists, and then he was actually talking to them, and he seemed more threatening and stuff.
It's true.
But then other scenes, he's just referring to Mother and stuff, but it's almost like he's talking to himself, which. Yeah, so I thought that kind of also got in the way of him being like a little bit more of an effective kind of villain.
Yeah, let's hope they don't bring him back in the next one.
And he did, even the invasion kind of thing that he's leading is sort of a kind of thing that we've seen before, so that was also kind of working against him. But I do have a few things that I think make him not the worst. I don't think he's a terrible villain. I think he just wasn't like, amazing. And I think like Zod and Lex Luthor, in my opinion, were really great villains. Steppenwolf is the weakest of the trilogy. But I do like that he connected with themes. And we talked about these in our last video for the positive aspects. But one of the themes is dealing with loss. And actually Steppenwolf is dealing with the loss that he failed in his attempt to conquer Earth. And he has not dealt with it very well at all. He's been in exile. It's like basically consumed him that he can't believe he had to retreat. So he deals with it poorly. And also, we talked about a theme of isolation versus collaboration, and he's very isolated. Again, like we said, he's talking to himself, basically. He has no collaborators, except for these insect parademons, And then there's also a theme that I didn't really mention last time, but there's a theme of inspiration being more powerful than fear. And he takes the fear side, where his parademons feed on fear, and he kind of comes down and tries to, bully the Amazons and stuff. And he really seems to operate by fear, but he actually is going to lose to people like Superman, who function by inspiring others.
Yeah, that's true. That aspect was cool and well done. I think really, to me, if you read the comics and even just the Superpowers comics, which has a lot in common with these kind of movies, he's more of a henchman for Darkseid, so they should have played that up more. Like, this guy is never going to be the big bad that Darkseid could be. He, it's like Desaad, then this guy, there was like Mantis and stuff, and I think they could have really played that to be like, maybe they could have needed more than one villain for this to kind of amp it up a little more, but we'll see what they do with the next one.
And I think something might have been cut out too, because the actor, Kieran Hines, he talked about Steppenwolf having this kind of drama of how he resents his nephew Darkseid, and that he's working for Darkseid, but he's actually trying to find a way to escape from under his, boot.
There you go.
And that was basically missing from the movie, as far as I could tell. So.
Definitely, yeah. That could have helped for sure.
I liked his axe, though, and I thought his axe going against Aquaman's trident and stuff was pretty cool. But
it was cool. I enjoyed it, seeing the axe get destroyed in the movie, and kind of reminded me of the part in Thor recently when Thor's hammer gets destroyed. I'm like, oh, it's just a cool moment. It's cool to see some comic stuff like that.
All right, so another criticism that we have is the plot of the movie is pretty straightforward. It's kind of simple, so it's not as complex as some other plots of movies that we really enjoy. So
Yeah, like if you were to look at it compared to some classic Justice League comics, it's really like a light plot.
hmm
Although that being said, I did like that they had that kind of introduction with Batman. That reminded me of the first issue of the Jim Lee Justice League.
yeah,
That
definitely.
rooftop stuff, that was really
Yeah,
cool.
Jeff Johns, yeah, and Jim
Yeah.
Lee. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, I definitely, I mentioned it to you off camera. I think that what they were going for is they're like, they have so many characters. We don't want to, like, overdo the story and have it hard to follow. But I think maybe it just came up a bit short that way. Nothing taken away from the movie, but it just was just a little bit light for me.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's just what you said, which is that their priority number one was to get the team right and to give everybody a fair shake in terms of background and interactions and development. And they really had like 6 league members to make sure they pay attention to, plus Steppenwolf. So once they're doing that, it's like they're kind of like, let's just kind of simplify the plot so that will give us more freedom to do the character work. So yeah. I can understand that, but it is a criticism, that you can't have it all. So we're going to kind of critique them on the plot.
Yeah, that's right.
So number 3 in our kind of critiques that we have here, and this is one that I'm kind of passionate about because I love Batman v Superman quite a lot. And a criticism I have for Justice League is I think that it does follow through Batman v Superman, and it is the conclusion to that trilogy. That's my stance. But there were some missed opportunities where they could have connected to BVS even more directly. So I'll give you a couple examples. One, Lois Lane gets the engagement ring at the end of Batman v Superman, and the engagement ring is shown in Justice League, but they don't talk about the engagement ring. There's a little allusion, to Martha Kent and Lois saying like, "Oh, mother-in-law, oops," that, but I mean, they didn't fully deal with the engagement ring, or they didn't have as much Christian symbolism as Zack Snyder established in Man of Steel and then BVS. They could have, I think, had a little bit more of that symbolism, and it would have been a really nice, coherent kind of trilogy that way. I've got some other things too, but I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Well, the ring thing, it's funny you mention it because I thought that was going to be mentioned as soon as it came into the shot when she's hugging him and stuff. And because he doesn't know that she like, he sent it to her, but, at that point.
Yeah, he doesn't know what the resolution is. Yeah.
Yeah. So it would have been really cool to have him react to that and be like, "Oh, you got that?" Or, "I forgot that I sent that," something, right? Mm-hmm. And even just a nod to them maybe being like, "Well, we'll have to make that official or something." That's something that's looked forward to in the next couple movies. And yeah, that was definitely a missed opportunity for sure. One for me was not having Perry White in there because we already have kind of a light version of the Daily Planet supporting staff in all these movies. So at least if we're going to have Lois, I thought it would be great to have a Perry White scene kind of reacting to Superman coming back to life. And I feel they just kind of missed the boat there. It would have been really nice to see that happen.
Yeah, I think I heard it was a scheduling conflict, but it would have been better if they could have made it work somehow.
Yeah.
Another one for me is in BVS, Batman had this nightmare vision with the Omega symbol and, parademons. And so I think there was a missed opportunity for Batman to at least mention parademons and be like, I had a vision with, creatures that looked like this. Or I had a vision with, an evil Superman, and we're about to bring Superman back. He didn't explicitly refer to the fact that I've seen some of this stuff before.
Yeah, totally. They could have explored that a bit more as well.
And it wouldn't have had to be a lot, but just some sort of mention I think would have been a little bit better. One thing I liked though was Lois Lane being the key. So the Flash in BVS told Bruce Lois Lane is the key. And then Bruce Wayne made sure to have Lois Lane ready there to win Superman back over. So to me, that was Lois Lane being the key, although they could have mentioned it explicitly. Like they could have said something like, But that was one. Also, music-wise, I love the Hans Zimmer score from Man of Steel and BVS. And they used it in the scout ship, but I thought there were some other spots where they could have just... Danny Elfman maybe could have found a few spots to thread that Zimmer music in. And for me, it would have had a really good emotional payoff because I love those past movies.
Yeah, I would agree too, because especially the movies have a different tone musically now compared to the other two. But what I did like, though, is that the Elfman score was a little more subtle than I expected it to be. Mm-hmm. And I like that he did bring in the notes from some previous superhero movies, even the John Williams stuff, and his own, Batman theme from Tim Burton. So that aspect I really liked.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what to expect with the music, and I actually didn't hate it. I thought it worked fine for the movie. It wasn't as iconic as, to me, the Zimmer stuff is.
Right.
But I was okay with those acknowledgments of the past themes. Because, this is like comic book. These are characters that have been around for 70-plus years. So we expect, even in a new version of the character, we should allow creative people to give nods to prior versions of the characters. So I was okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, even that one scene where they came out of that Batman ship in the water and like all flew off together and Alfred was sitting on it, that totally looked like something designed right out of the Nolan films. So I was like, that was kind of cool too.
Yeah. All right, so this is kind of just a minor little criticism, and it's really easy to snip it and kind of not worry about it. It's not a big thing, but we talked about in our positive video that we liked how the humor was used, and a lot of it worked really well. But for me, there were a few spots where I did not like the humor. Just a few. Okay. One of them, I didn't like the woman on TV talking about the anal probes. To me, alien anal probes is like a 20-year-old joke that to me has kind of gotten a little bit old. And I thought it took away from the threat level that we were supposed to feel about that janitor. Right? Like if you're joking about him, then we aren't worrying about him as much as we should.
True.
I didn't like the Flash on top of Wonder Woman kind of body to body sort of thing. My audience, the theater I was in, laughed really big at that, but I'm sort of like, but these heroes, I think we could be a little bit more respectful of them. And it's just an easy thing to just kind of not have that in there. And then the other one for me was, I loved when Cyborg and Superman were at the very end of the movie, and they were the ones to break this apart. And they had this great line of, I like being alive, and Cyborg says, me too. Like, that was great, because those were the two characters that actually died, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was awesome. But then after they bust apart, Superman says, I changed my mind, I wish I were dead, or something like that. I didn't like that joke because of Lois and Martha. Like, Lois and Martha grieved so hard for him being dead, and then for him just to joke about dying again, I would have rather not have that one. I liked Cyborg, though, saying that I can't feel my toes, or my toes hurt. That one was really good.
That was funny. Yeah, there was a couple scenes for me, like, some of those ones didn't bug me as much, but I totally get your point on them, though. Some of the one-liners in parts of the movie felt like you kind of expect them a little bit, but I guess it's going to happen in this kind of movie, Yeah. There's so many different characters, and they kind of have those moments where they didn't go super pedestrian, like, let's do this or something, but there was a few of those scenes where you're like, they can't all be hits,
Right, and that's the thing, when you go in with humor, you're going to have some that miss the mark, at least for some people. So those were some for me.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, and then the last thing for us that's a little bit of a disappointment that we had is the lack of Darkseid, and we didn't get to see Apocalypse at all. There was one mention of Darkseid's name, but we didn't get to see him, and for like a general audience member, that means nothing that he said for Darkseid, and so that was something that was kind of missing, and I thought would probably be in there in some way.
Yeah, I was really surprised too. Like, they didn't even kind of show Apocalypse and show the breadth of this huge place and what it is, or what these parademons actually come from, or what Darkseid's got an army of people besides Steppenwolf, like something just to kind of show you that there's more to this than that going on, and it's leading to something else. And also, Darkseid's like such an iconic DC villain and Jack Kirby creation. I would love to see just a headshot even of him, and it would have been really cool. But I'm almost positive we'll get it someday, but just not yet, I guess.
Yeah, I think too. Like Steppenwolf talks about he wants to take his place as a new god, but like, they didn't show us what the new gods were. We didn't have any frame of reference for that. So, it kind of it's also might be part of why Steppenwolf was a little bit flat, was because we didn't really see Darkseid, his overlord, or we didn't see the other worlds that he was creating where they had turned them into like fire pits and stuff. So, that was just something where, because we know how rich that world is in the comics, for us it was probably a little bit of a disappointment here.
Yeah, like he almost seemed to have more of a tie to the Kryptonian stuff from the ship from Batman versus Superman, and it really should be like, oh, this character is something that's totally something different, and they're dealing with something that's a way different threat level now, which they kind of pulled off in the fight scenes and stuff, but let's have more behind that and really show what this is leading to.
Yeah. All right, so that's a few of the things that we thought could have been better, but overall, we're still fans of the movie, and I'm looking forward to digging into it on my podcast, JLU Podcast. And Jason, thanks so much for getting back together and talking about it with me.